Hey guys, good morning. Welcome back for another reading from Frindle. And this book is by Andrew Clements. We have made it through the first 3 chapters. I've even given you a couple questions to think about at the end of each chapter, so stay tuned at the end if you are doing the reading comprehension part of this with me. But we are on to chapter 4, Word Detective. It was a beautiful September afternoon. Bright sun, cool breeze, blue sky, but not for Nick. Nick had to do a little report for the next day. Plus, copy all the definitions for 35 words. Miss Granger, for Miss Granger. This was not the way school was supposed to work. Not for Nick. There was a rule at Nick's house: homework first. And that meant right after school, Nick had heard his older brother James groan and grumble about this rule for years, right up until he graduated for high school 2 years ago. And then James wrote home from college after his first semester and said, "My grades are looking great because when I came here, I already knew how to put things first." That letter was proof to Nick's mom and dad, was the proof that Nick's mom and dad had been looking for. Homework first was the law from September to June. This had never bothered Nick before because he hardly ever had homework. Oh, sure, he looked over his spelling words on Thursday nights, and there had been a few short book reports in 4th grade, but other than that, nothing. Up to now, schoolwork never spilled over into his free time. Thanks to Miss Granger, those days were gone. First, he looked up the definition in the brand new red dictionary that his mom bought him from Miss Granger. Bought him because Miss Granger told her to. It took almost an hour. He could hear a baseball game in John's yard down the street, yelling and shouting, and every few minutes the sharp crack of the bat connecting with the pitch. But he had a report to do for Miss Granger. Nick looked at the very front of the dictionary. There was an introduction to the book called Words and Their Origin. Perfect, Nick thought. It was just what I needed to do. What he needed to do his report. It would all be over in a few minutes. Nick could already feel the sun and breeze on his face, and he ran outside to play. Homework all done. This is that picture, homework first. Is that what you were picturing Nick to look like in your head? Then he read the first sentence from the introduction. Without question, this modern American dictionary is one of the most surprisingly complex and profound documents ever to be created, for it embodies unparalleled etymological detail, reflecting not only superb lexicographic scholarship, but also the dreams and speech and imaginative talents of millions of people over thousands of years. For every person who has ever spoken or written in English has had a hand in its making. What? Nick scratched his head and read it again, and then again. Not much better. It was sort of like trying to read the ingredients on a shampoo bottle. He slammed the dictionary shut and walked downstairs. Nick's family did a lot of reading, so bookshelves covered 3 or 4 walls in the family room. There were 2 sets of encyclopedias. The black set was for grown-ups and the red set was for kids. Nick pulled out the D volume of the red set and looked up dictionary. There was 3 full pages with headings like Early Dictionaries, Word Detectives, and Dictionaries Today. Not very exciting. But he had to do it, so Nick just plopped down on the couch and read all of it. And when he was finished with the kids' book, he opened up the black encyclopedia and read most of what it said about dictionaries too. He understood only about half of what he read. He leaned back on the couch and covered his eyes with his arm, trying to imagine himself giving a report on all this boring stuff. He'd be lucky to have 3 minutes worth, but because Nick was Nick, he suddenly had an idea, and it brought a grin to his face. Nick decided that giving this report could actually be fun. He could make it into something special. After all, Miss Granger had asked for it. And that is the end of that chapter. So thinking about that chapter, my question for you isn't quite a question. It's actually going to be more of that visualizing. So when I showed you that picture of Nick, is that who you had been seeing in your head? Because now we're up to chapter 5, so that's the last 4 chapters. And our brains do this really cool thing. When we hear stories and we don't see the pictures, we build a picture in our brain based off the characteristics that we hear and the describing words used in a book. And so I'm just curious, is that who you saw? If not, that's totally okay, because that's the point of a book, and that's why when the illustrator and author often don't work together when they create a book. And so the illustrator creates what they see based off the author's words, and that could not even be what the author envisioned the character Nick to look like. And then that's also kind of what happens when people make books into movies, is that's the adaptation, or the director and the writer and the producer and all those people take that and they find they build what they visualized in their head and they turn it into a movie. And so that's why sometimes you'll see movies that aren't like books at all, because it's how they take it in their brain and turn it into something else. And so I'm just really curious, and I hope you, even though you've now seen what the illustrator made Nick to look like, I hope you continue to see Nick and his friends and Miss Granger how you envision them in your brain, because that makes the connection to this book even more powerful. All right, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening, and tune back in for chapter 5.